It is the middle of August, and you are standing at your kitchen window, looking out at your yard, and something about it bothers you in a way you cannot quite name. The grass is there, the mulch is there, maybe a few annuals you planted in May that are looking tired now, leggy and faded, holding on but not thriving. The neighbors on your left have something purple cascading over their fence that you have walked past 40 times this summer, and every single time it stopped you. The neighbors on your right have a bed along their driveway that has been green and full and interesting since April and shows no sign of slowing down. Your yard is fine, fine is the word, and you know, standing at that window, that fine is not what you wanted when you bought this house. You wanted lush. You wanted the kind of yard that makes people slow down when they walk past. You spent money in spring. You spent weekends. And what you have is fine. The problem is not that you did not try. The problem is that nobody told you that August is not the end of the planting season. August is the most important planting month of the entire year for the plants that will give you everything you are looking for. And most people find that out about 3 Augusts too late. I want you to sit with that for a moment. There is no mystery to a lush landscape. There never was. The yards that look expensive and full and alive in every season are not the result of a bigger budget or a professional landscaper or some rare knowledge that only certain people have access to. They are almost always the result of one decision made correctly, usually years before you ever walked past and admired them. The decision to plant perennials that spread, not annuals that you replant every spring and that die every fall, and that cost you money and weekends every single year. Not slow-growing shrubs that take a decade to fill a space. Perennials that come back every year, that expand their footprint every season, that fill gaps and cover ground, and create exactly the kind of layered, textured, living landscape that makes your yard look like it has been tended by someone who deeply understood plants for a very long time. The 15 plants I'm going to walk you through today are the ones that do all of that. And I am going to tell you not just what they are, but where to put them, how they spread, what they look like in every season, and why August, specifically, is the window that gives them the best possible start. Because the reason you plant these in August is not arbitrary. There is a biology behind it that most people never hear explained, and once you understand it, you will never think about fall planting the same way again. Before we get into the 15 plants, I need to explain something about how perennials think. Because perennials do not think the way annuals think, and if you treat them the same way, you will always be disappointed. An annual's entire life mission is to flower, set seed, and die within one growing season. It puts almost all of its energy into what you can see above the ground, the flowers, the foliage, the display, because it has one season to reproduce, and it knows it. A perennial's mission is completely different. A perennial is building something. In its first year, it puts the majority of its energy not into the show above ground, but into the root system below it. Because a deep and established root system is what allows it to survive winter, emerge earlier than anything else in spring, and expand its territory every subsequent year. When you plant a perennial in spring, it spends the warm months trying to do 2 things at once: establish its roots and put on a show, and it often does neither as well as you want. When you plant that same perennial in August, something different happens. The soil is warm from a full summer of sun, which is exactly the condition that encourages rapid root development. The air is beginning to cool, which reduces the stress on the above-ground growth and tells the plant it does not need to spend energy on flowers right now. The plant gets 6 to 8 weeks of warm soil to drive its roots deep before the ground freezes. And when spring comes, it wakes up with a root system that would normally take a full growing season to build. It is not a trick. It is just understanding what the plant is trying to do and giving it the conditions to do it well. August planting does that better than any other month for most perennials. Now let us talk about the 15. The first plant is creeping phlox, and if you have ever seen a slope or a rock wall absolutely covered in a carpet of pink, purple or white flowers, so dense in spring that you cannot see the foliage beneath them, you have seen creeping phlox doing exactly what it does. It spreads by sending out lateral stems that root wherever they touch the ground, slowly expanding its mat year after year until it covers whatever you give it to cover. It grows 4 to 6 inches tall and stays low and tight, which makes it exceptional for slopes where erosion is a problem, for the front edge of a border where you want something that flows rather than stands upright, and for any spot where you want early spring color from a plant that requires almost nothing from you once it is established. It is fully hardy through brutal winters. It tolerates poor soil better than almost any other flowering perennial, and once it has established a mat, it suppresses weeds so effectively that you can stop thinking about that area of your yard almost entirely. Plant it in August in full sun, water it through September, and by next April, you will have flowers. By the April after that, you will have a carpet. The one thing creeping phlox does not forgive is wet feet. Do not plant it in low spots where water collects. Give it drainage, and it will reward you for decades. The second plant is catmint, and this is the one that explains your neighbor's purple cascade. Catmint, which is nepeta, produces long waving spikes of lavender blue flowers from late spring through midsummer, and if you cut it back hard after the first flush of bloom, it will flower again in late summer and into fall. It spreads by self-seeding and by gentle root expansion, filling a space gradually and generously without ever becoming the kind of aggressive spreader that keeps you up at night. It grows 18 to 24 inches tall and wide and has a soft, billowing, almost romantic habit that makes it look expensive in a way that is completely disproportionate to what it costs or how much attention it needs. It is drought tolerant once established. It is deer resistant because of the aromatic foliage, and it is one of the most important plants in your yard for pollinators. Bees work it constantly from the moment it opens until the moment it closes. The reason it belongs on this list specifically is what it does to the spaces around it. Catmint, planted along a driveway or a path or the front of a border, does not just fill its own space. It softens the entire area around it, blurring hard edges, connecting other plants visually, making a collection of individual specimens look like a designed planting. That is a skill that most expensive plants cannot pull off, and catmint does it automatically. Plant it in August in full sun to light shade, cut it back to about 4 inches in late fall, and do not be surprised when it comes up bigger and more vigorous next spring than anything you planted in May. The third plant is black-eyed Susan, and it is on this list because it does something that very few perennials do as well. It fills the gap. The gap between the spring bloomers finishing and the fall bloomers starting is the period when most yards look tired and exhausted, when the energy of early summer has spent itself and the autumn color has not yet arrived. Black-eyed Susan blooms from July through September, which means it is carrying your landscape through exactly that gap, and it does it with a brightness and cheerfulness that reads from a distance and draws the eye from every angle. It spreads by self-seeding prolifically, which means that after the first year, you will find new plants coming up around the original, gradually colonizing the space around it and creating a naturalistic drift that looks intentional and beautiful. It is native to North America, which means it evolved here, and the local insects know it. The native bees and butterflies work it constantly, and the goldfinches eat the seeds in fall, which means you are not just growing a plant, you are building a habitat. It tolerates poor dry soil. It tolerates heat. It tolerates neglect in a way that makes it genuinely appropriate for real people who have real lives and cannot water every other day. Plant it in August, and it will spend the fall establishing roots and be ready to put on a full show its first summer. Cut some of the spent flower heads off in fall to control where it self-seeds. Leave some for the birds. The fourth plant is coneflower, Echinacea, and I am putting it here separately from black-eyed Susan because even though they occupy a similar niche in the landscape, they do different things, and together they are better than either one alone. Coneflower blooms slightly later, staying in flower from midsummer into fall, and it comes in a range of colors that black-eyed Susan does not. Deep magenta, soft pink, white, orange, coral, and the newer varieties have extended this palette even further. It spreads by both self-seeding and by slow root expansion, and a single plant planted in August will be a small colony within 3 years if you let the seedlings stay where they come up. The flower heads, if you leave them standing through winter, are architecturally beautiful in snow and ice, and they are one of the most important food sources for wintering songbirds. Coneflower and black-eyed Susan, planted together, create a naturalistic meadow effect that looks designed when it is actually just two plants doing what they do naturally next to each other. And that combination, in a sunny border, will carry your landscape from July through the first hard frost with almost no intervention from you. Both are drought-tolerant once established. Both are native. Both are extraordinary pollinator plants. Plant coneflower in August, in full sun. Do not over-amend the soil. These plants evolved in lean conditions, and too much fertility makes them floppy and leave the seed heads standing until March. The fifth plant is a juga, also called bugleweed, and this is your solution for every shaded area where nothing else wants to grow. A juga is a low, mat-forming ground cover that spreads by runners the way strawberries spread, sending out horizontal stems that root at intervals and create new rosettes, expanding steadily and reliably into whatever space you give it. It grows 4 to 6 inches tall, produces short spikes of blue or purple flowers in spring, and has some of the most interesting foliage of any ground cover available. Depending on the variety you choose, you can have leaves that are deep bronze, burgundy, chocolate, variegated green and cream, or multicolored. It grows in full shade, part shade, and even tolerates more sun than you might expect, as long as it has consistent moisture. It is the plant for the dry shade under a mature tree, where nothing else survives, for the narrow strip between a fence and a path, where the soil never gets any direct sun, for any problem area where you have tried things and watched them fail. A juga does not fail in shade, it thrives in shade, and once it has established its mat, it crowds out weeds so completely that those problem areas essentially take care of themselves. Plant it in August, keep it watered through the fall, and by next spring, it will be spreading on its own. The one thing to know is that a juga can move into lawn areas if you let it, so plant it in beds with defined edges, or be prepared to trim it back at the border twice a year. The sixth plant is lamb's ear, and it earns its place on this list, not for flowers, though it does produce soft purple flower spikes in early summer, but for what it does to the visual composition of everything around it. Lamb's ear has thick, silver-white, densely woolly leaves that catch the light in a way that no other common perennial does, and that silver presence in a border has an effect that garden designers understand and homeowners often discover by accident when they finally plant it and cannot believe what it did to the beds around it. Silver and grey in the garden act as a visual connector. They make colors that would otherwise clash look intentional next to each other. A purple salvia and an orange coneflower look like a mistake without something silver between them. With lamb's ear between them, they look designed. It spreads by slow root expansion into a dense weed-suppressing mat, and it tolerates heat, drought, and poor soil with remarkable composure. It does not tolerate wet winters well, so in climates with wet, heavy snow, plant it in raised beds or very well-drained spots. Plant it in August in full sun, almost ignore it, and watch what it does to the beds around it next season. The answer will be that everything else looks better. The seventh plant is creeping jenny, and this is the one for the wet low spots, the areas that stay damp after rain, the edges of water features, the spots where other plants rot. Creeping jenny spreads by horizontal stems that root as they go, creating a dense, bright green or chartreuse carpet that moves quickly and covers ground faster than almost any other perennial ground cover on this list. The golden chartreuse variety, Lysimachia nummularia aurea, is one of the most visually striking ground covers available, a color so vivid and warm that it reads from across the yard and makes dark shaded areas look like they have their own light source. It grows 2 to 4 inches tall. It stays evergreen in mild climates, and goes dormant in cold ones. And it is genuinely one of the easiest plants on this entire list to establish because it roots so readily and grows so enthusiastically that it is difficult to plant it wrong. Put it at the edge of a pond or a rain garden, and it will drape over the edge in a way that looks like it was placed by a professional designer. Put it under a large tree in moist soil, and it will fill the space within a season. Plant it in August, in any moist to wet spot, with part shade to full shade, and stand back. Creeping Jenny does not wait around. The 8th plant is sedum, specifically the spreading ground cover varieties, rather than the upright autumn joy types. And sedum earns its place on this list because of what it does for the areas that everything else gives up on. Hot, dry, rocky, poor soil, in full sun, the strip along a south-facing foundation, the slope that bakes all day and drains every drop of water, the cracks in a stone path. Sedum lives in those places, not because it tolerates them, but because it genuinely prefers them. Spreading sedums grow 2 to 4 inches tall, produce clusters of pink, yellow, or white flowers in summer, and spread by gentle root expansion into dense mats that are completely impervious to drought once established. Some varieties have such interesting foliage, blue-grey, red-tipped, burgundy, that they look good even in the months when nothing is flowering. They are the solution to the problem spots that have cost you money and frustration because nothing you plant in them survives. Sedum survives everything. Plant it in August, in the driest, most difficult spot in your yard. Do not amend the soil. Do not fertilize. Water it in, and then mostly leave it alone, and watch it establish itself in exactly the place where establishment should be impossible. The 9th plant is salvia, specifically the perennial salvias, like Salvia nemorosa, and its many varieties. And this is the one that anchors the middle of the border, the way nothing else can. Perennial salvia produces dense, upright spikes of deep violet, purple, blue, or pink flowers from late spring into summer, and like catmint, it will rebloom if you cut it back after the first flush. It grows 12 to 24 inches tall depending on variety. It is completely deer resistant because deer do not eat aromatic plants. It is drought tolerant. It is one of the top 5 plants you can grow for bees and butterflies, and it pairs with almost every other plant on this list in a way that creates visual depth and contrast. Salvia planted behind creeping phlox gives you 2 layers. Salvia planted next to lamb's ear gives you color against silver. Salvia planted in a mass planting gives you the kind of formal, structured look that reads as expensive and intentional from the street. It spreads slowly by root expansion and self-seeds modestly, filling its space without overwhelming the plants beside it. Plant it in August in full sun. Cut it back hard in early spring before new growth emerges, and it will come back each year larger and more floriferous than the year before. The 10th plant is yarrow, and yarrow belongs on this list because of what it does to a landscape that has too many soft textures and not enough contrast. Yarrow has flat-topped flower clusters in yellow, white, pink, red, or salmon that appear from June through August. But the feature that makes it irreplaceable is the foliage. Fine, feathery, almost ferny in texture, it creates a visual contrast with broad-leafed plants that makes both look more interesting. It spreads aggressively by underground rhizomes and by self-seeding, which means you should plant it where you want it to fill space, rather than where you need it to stay contained. And you should divide it every 3 years, or it will begin to crowd its neighbors. In exchange for that small amount of management, it gives you months of flower color, extraordinary drought tolerance, complete indifference to poor soil, and foliage that dries beautifully for arrangements. The pollinators treat yarrow the way commuters treat a major transit hub, constantly arriving and departing in numbers that will make you stop and watch. Plant it in August in full sun, plan for it to spread, and in 2 seasons it will have filled whatever space you gave it completely. The 11th plant is ornamental oregano, and most people have never considered putting this in a border rather than an herb bed. and that is a significant missed opportunity. Ornamental oregano, specifically varieties like Kent Beauty and Hopleys, produces drooping clusters of papery bracts in shades of pink and purple that look like something a florist would charge you for. Delicate and layered and interesting from midsummer into fall. It spreads by gentle root expansion into low mounds 12 to 18 inches across, and it has all the drought tolerance and poor soil performance you would expect from a Mediterranean herb, because that is exactly what it is. The foliage is aromatic and deer-resistant, and the flowers dry on the plant in a way that keeps the border looking interesting even after the fresh bloom has finished. It is one of the plants that the more you look at it, the more you see. The layered, translucent bracts catching the light differently at different times of day. The bees working the tiny flowers hidden inside them. The way the whole plant moves in a breeze with a looseness that makes rigid plants around it look more dynamic by contrast. Plant it in August, in full sun, in well-drained soil, and treat it, essentially, as you would treat lavender. Do not overwater it. Do not coddle it. It does not want to be coddled. The 12th plant is Rudbeckia fulgida, the perennial black-eyed Susan, and I am distinguishing it here from the annual and biennial Rudbeckia hirta because they behave differently, and the distinction matters when you are building a landscape for the long term. Rudbeckia fulgida goldsturm is one of the most reliable, most floriferous, most landscape-worthy perennials in existence. It spreads steadily by root expansion, forming clumps that get larger every year, and it blooms from late July through October with a consistency and duration that almost nothing else matches. It is the plant that carries your landscape through August and September, when many others have finished. That bright, clear yellow against dark centers visible from the street, and combined with the blue of catmint or salvia, it creates a color combination that reads as designed and intentional without any effort on your part. It is fully drought tolerant once established. It takes division every 4 years or so to keep it vigorous, and those divisions give you free plants to fill other areas or to give to neighbors who will ask you every year what it is and where you got it. Plant it in August in full sun, water it through September, and by its second season, you will wonder why you waited. The 13th plant is Liriope, lily turf, and this is the plant for every edge, every border, every transition between one surface and another that you want to define cleanly and maintain easily. Liriope forms dense clumps of dark green or variegated grass-like foliage that produces purple or white flower spikes in late summer, and it spreads slowly by underground stolons into a gradually widening colony that stays tidy and defined rather than sprawling aggressively. It is one of the most shade-tolerant plants on this list, growing in everything from full sun to deep shade with very little change in its behavior, and it is one of the most drought-tolerant once established. It stays evergreen in mild climates, goes partially dormant in cold ones, and even in late winter, before anything else has greened up, Liriope is still dark and present, and holding the edges of your beds with a neatness that makes the whole garden look cared for. It is the plant that professional landscapers use on commercial properties everywhere because it works. It spreads to fill space without becoming a problem. It requires almost no maintenance beyond cutting it back hard in late winter before new growth emerges, and it looks good in every season. Plant it in August along any edge you want to define, in sun or shade, and water it through fall. It will establish quietly and begin spreading on its own by the following spring. The 14th plant is Penstemon, and this is the one that will make the hummingbirds find your yard. Penstemon produces tubular flowers on upright spikes, specifically shaped for hummingbird feeding, and in the red and pink varieties, the hummingbirds will locate it within days of it coming into bloom, with an urgency that makes it seem like they have been waiting for it. It spreads by self-seeding and slow root expansion, naturalizing into a colony over time in a way that looks like a wildflower meadow in the best sense, unplanned and alive. It grows 18 to 36 inches tall depending on variety, blooms from late spring into summer, and has some of the most refined flower detail of any perennial in this size range. Worth getting close to, worth examining. It wants full sun, it wants good drainage, it does not want to sit in wet soil through winter, and given those conditions, it is remarkably tough and long-lived. The native North American penstemon species are extraordinary garden plants that are underused because the garden industry has not marketed them as aggressively as it has marketed plants from other regions, which is a mistake that every gardener who plants one and watches the hummingbirds arrive immediately understands. Plant it in August, in full sun, in well-drained soil, and in the first spring, you will wonder why it is not in every yard in your neighborhood. The 15th plant is creeping thyme, and I have saved it for last because it solves a problem that every other plant on this list does not, which is what you do with the ground between your stepping stones, along your path edges, in the gaps of your stone terrace, in any of the hard surface transitional spaces where you want something living, but where a conventional plant would be in the way. Creeping thyme grows 1 to 3 inches tall, spreads by horizontal stem growth into a dense mat, produces tiny pink or purple flowers in early summer that cover the plant so completely the foliage disappears beneath them, and releases a gentle thyme fragrance every time it is stepped on. It tolerates foot traffic better than almost any other flowering perennial. It fills gaps between stones and pavers in a way that makes hard surfaces look like they grew there naturally rather than being installed. It is completely drought tolerant. It thrives in heat. It asks for nothing except sun and drainage, and it is one of the most effective weed suppressors available for the specific spaces where it grows. A path edged with creeping thyme and a border filled with catmint, salvia, and black-eyed Susan is a complete landscape. It has texture at every level. It has color from spring through fall. It has fragrance and movement and life in a way that a yard filled with annuals and mulch never achieves, no matter how much money you spend on it. Here is what I want you to understand about why these 15 plants and why August. Every yard you have walked past and admired, every landscape that made you slow down, every garden that seemed to have a quality that you could feel but could not quite describe, that quality has a name. It is called establishment. It is what happens when a plant has had enough time in the ground to build the root system that lets it do what it was always capable of doing. The plants in admirable landscapes are not better plants than what you can buy. They are the same plants with more time in the ground. That is the entire secret. And August is when you start giving your plants that time. You plant in August, and those plants spend 6 weeks driving their roots deep into warm soil before the ground freezes. When spring comes, they wake up weeks before anything you plant in April, and they grow with an energy that reflects the root system they built last fall. By summer, they are twice the plant that a spring-planted version would be. By the following year, you cannot tell that you did not plant them 3 years ago. You lose nothing by planting in August. You gain a full season of root development that no spring planting can give you. Your neighbors, who have the lush yards, the cascading purple, the full layered borders, they did not start with different plants. They started in August. Go to the nursery this weekend. The summer stock is still there, and it is often on sale, because most people have already convinced themselves that the planting season is over. It is not over. It is just beginning.